chapter 1, 5 to 11, the Message. I said, God, God of heaven, the great and awesome God, loyal to his covenant and faithful to those who love him and obey his commands. Look at me, listen to me. Pay attention to this prayer of your servant that I'm praying day and night in intercession for your servants, the people of Israel, confessing the sins of the people of Israel. And I'm including myself, I and my ancestors, among those who have sinned against you. We've treated you like dirt. We haven't done what you told us. We haven't followed your commandments, and haven't respected the decisions you gave to Moses, your servant. All the same, remember the warning you posted to your servant Moses. If you betray me, I'll scatter you to the four winds. But if you come back to me and do what I tell you, I'll gather up all those scattered peoples from wherever they ended up and put them back in the place I chose to mark with my name. Well, there they are, your servants, your people, whom you so powerfully and impressively redeemed. O Master, listen to me, listen to your servant's prayer, and yes, to all your servants who delight in honoring me, and make me successful today so that I get what I want from the king. I was cupbearer to the king.
So the story of Nehemiah happens during the Babylonian exile. And back up a little bit, we're going to do a 5-part series on the book of Nehemiah over the next couple of weeks called The Restoration of What Once Was. And here's the story of Nehemiah basically in a nutshell. That in the time of Nehemiah, Jerusalem is abandoned. There was this thought that the only way that the Babylonians could be able to control the large, vast empire that they had was to erase the history of all the people that they conquered. And so when the time came, Jerusalem was evacuated, all the people were taken out of the city, they were taken to Babylon, and they were expected to assimilate into this new society of Babylon. Many of the educated and talented individuals that came from the territories that they had conquered were incorporated into the government and given government positions. So we know Ezra is one of the ones that we hear about that is part of the Babylonian exile. Nehemiah is another one. The two of them work hand in hand in what's called the restoration of Jerusalem. So about after 120 years of exile, Jerusalem is lying abandoned. The walls of the city are beginning to crumble and fall to the ground. It looks like an abandoned city. There's only a few people that are still there. Nehemiah is off in Babylon. He is the cupbearer serving the king, King Artaxerxes at that time. And God comes to him and says, Nehemiah, I have chosen you to be the one who will rebuild the city of Jerusalem. Now, Nehemiah, of course, has never lived in Jerusalem. He doesn't know much about Jerusalem other than the fact that it's the ancestral home of his people. And he's kind of baffled by why God would be asking him out of all people to be the one to do the restoration project of the city of Jerusalem. But God has chosen him and given him his task. And it's because he is in a unique position as the king's cupbearer. And that might not seem like an important job, in the royal court of all the things that you can have as governors and people who are trained to be engineers and trained in economics and all these things that one would need to be able to build one of the largest capital campaigns in the history of Israel, rebuilding the city that is in ruins. But here's an important part that comes down to why I think God chose Nehemiah for the task. He's the king's cupbearer, which means it's his job to taste the king's cup to make sure that the wine in it is not spoiled or perhaps poisoned by a foreign adversary. And the amount of trust that must have existed between him and the king because of his position puts him in a unique place that God is able to use that relationship for Nehemiah to convince King Artaxerxes to allow him to rebuild the city of Jerusalem. Now, all of us have friends, right? And I remember during COVID, you might remember this, we were afraid to go into restaurants and eat with other people, right? You would never drink off the cup of someone else, right? Unless they were a family member, right? During COVID. Only certain people would you feel comfortable being able to share a meal with, but that's so important because who we eat with shows who we trust and who we're in a relationship depending upon the types of meals that we eat together, define the relationship and the friendship that we have with one another. For example, you might have a friend who, no matter what, whatever time of day it is, they can pop over to your house for a bite to eat, no invitation needed, no pre-planning, right? You allow them to go through your fridge and grab whatever food they want because of that type of friendship. Opposed to others, you have to clean the entire house, right? And make sure you have the fridge stocked with the right food and set up appetizers. The way that we share a meal with one another defines our relationship. And I find it so amazing that when Jesus breaks bread and pours the cup and shares with his disciples, he's defining the relationship in the fact that they're not just friends or acquaintances or colleagues, but in the sharing of a meal together, they are family. I'll share a story with you of a friend of mine from Dallas, Texas. My wife was part of a sorority at the University of Illinois a while ago. And one of her sorority sisters, who's a close friend of ours, who was one of our bridesmaids in our wedding, came to visit us from Texas. And we went out by the fire pit one night. I set it up for us to be able to go and enjoy a nice evening. She wanted to have a nice glass of wine while she was out there by the fire pit. And I took out a special glass that I had in my cabinet. And I said, Claire, you can use this glass. I said, it's a special glass. We only reserve it for good friends of ours. So we poured her a glass of wine. We went out by the fire pit. And by accident, she knocked the glass over and it fell on the stone patio we had, and it broke into a bunch of pieces. And she said, oh, I'll promise I'll get you another glass. And we said, Claire, you can't get us another glass. She goes, what do you mean? I can't order it online or something like that? I said, no, that glass was from Air Force One, so that's why it had the logo playing on the cover. Now, even though that was the case, I got access to be able to go out and see Marine One and Air Force One a number of years ago when they were at the base I was at, and I was able to get that glass. I'm still convinced that testing connections, I keep on asking my friends, they go, next time you're down at Andrews Air Force Base, I'm like, go by and see if you can convince you, one of the security guys, one of the Ravens down there, to see if they'll let us have another one of those glasses, because you can buy them, but only at the bottom of the ramp of Air Force One if you have the right connections. So, but I can see the look on her face. But it was one of those things we said, we only share this with people that we really love and care and trust. And so, even in the midst of that, we say, Claire, it doesn't matter. Our friendship is so strong that even though that glass is broken, our friendship is even more important than that glass to be able to have. Well, God speaks to Nehemiah, and he things up there. It's his job to bring the glass or the goblet or whatever it is to King Artaxerxes to be able to drink whatever he wants to drink and know that he's not going to be poisoned or get food poisoning. There'll be no gnats or flies in those days in his drink. And as I think about this, I go, it kind of makes sense because Nehemiah becomes really the king's drinking buddy, right? Because every time Nehemiah is with the king, anytime he wants to have something to drink, whether it's late at night, 2 o'clock in the morning, it doesn't matter. Nehemiah is at his bedside, checking to make sure that the wine is good before Nehemiah's King Artaxerxes, begins to drink out of it. And there has to be a level of confidentiality, I would imagine, as well. I don't know if they had like NDA back then, but if you're around the king and he's drinking at these royal banquets or royal proceedings, or he's just blowing off steam after a long day of hard work, of ruling an empire or whatever, I imagine after a couple of glasses of wine, the king might let things out that are secret or confidential. That would have been like national security in those days. And Nehemiah has to be trusted to be able to keep the king's secrets. It has to be trusted as a foreigner, right? Not someone that's part of the king's family, not someone that's even, of the king's, native, people that you would think in Babylon, but this outsider who's trusted with this job of tasting the wine. And so God speaks to Nehemiah and says, you are the person that I have chosen out of all the people that I can choose to have Jerusalem rebuilt. You are the person that I've chosen because Nehemiah is a person of integrity and a person who can be trusted. If he can be trusted with the king's secrets, if he can be trusted with the king's life, if he can be trusted to be faithful to the king, to be there 24/7 no matter when the king needs him, that special relationship between Nehemiah and King Artaxerxes makes him the person who has the influence community that was lost, and to bring it back and to revive it once again. And what I've learned from the story of looking at the story, what stands out for me is we never know when God is going to put us in a position to be the right person at the right time to ask the right question. And the thing that stands out in this passage that we'll be exploring over the next couple of weeks is Nehemiah, even if God gave him this task, you'll find throughout the story as we go along. At first he goes, God, I know you've given me this task, but I don't think it's the right moment for me to ask the king. Help me find the right moment for the right time for me to be able to make this request. You know, that elevator pitch that you might have prepared and going, when will I have the opportunity to be able to pitch this idea or to share this idea and know that it is the right time and the right place in which it will be received and others will act upon it. So Nehemiah turns to the Lord and asks God, even though I might be the right person, I am still relying upon you to give me the right moment and the right time to ask on your behalf. I know, as I shared last week, with Paul and Lydia in our story, Paul was looking for the right person in the right place, right? Lydia was down by the riverside, and Paul was coming to be able to share his message, and he was looking for the right person who had the network and the influence to be able to give them access to the city of Philippi to be able to build a church there. In the same way, Nehemiah is that person who's looking for the right moment at the right time. He's already got the relationship with the right person, but is it too big of an ask in a friendship to be able to ask such a thing? But at the end of the time, God opens up the door and gives Nehemiah the opportunity in the moment. We'll get to that in the next couple of weeks as we go through this series. But think about in your own personal life as you're going through this. When has God put you in the right place at the right time with the right people to be able to do something that you thought was impossible that couldn't be done? In the church, as we go through and we think about the things that are going on in the church today and the need for us to be able to grow and rebuild and to be able to restore what was. Many of us probably remember church back in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, right? Sunday schools with 60, 70, 80 kids in the vacation Bible school where the classrooms were overflowing. Perhaps there were 2 services because the sanctuary wasn't big enough to be able to host just one service. I think kind of like, the story of Nehemiah here. Jerusalem once was a city that was filled with life, but over time only a few were left in what was a scattered city because of the exile that happened. Everybody left. And now it's Nehemiah's job there to be able to bring back the people who had left to be able to return, to be part of that city again, and to make it into a great city as well. And so as we look at this, the question will be over the next couple of weeks is, when is God putting us in the right place at the right time to be able to reach out with friendships that we have to make those connections, to be able to bring back and rebuild and make those acts that are needed in partnership with one another, to be able to do things that perhaps seem difficult, seem hard, or impossible. Realize this, God has already laid out the plan. God already knows what the end goal will be at the end of time. All God asks of us is to be faithful partners in the process. And when God gives us that nudge, as he did to Nehemiah, to act upon something, we simply take that moment and say, all right, Lord, even though I may know it comes as a risk, even though I know it might be something out of my comfort zone to do, if you give me the right nudge, I will do it. And then God lays out the plan. It's God who does the work, but he only does the work after we show that we are willing to be partners in the process. And so that's just a quick glimpse of what Nehemiah looks like in the story of us being able to explore it over the next several weeks of how Nehemiah goes from just being king's cupbearer, receiving this message, to finally being able to make the ask. And then at the end of Nehemiah, we'll get to the story of how everybody did return from the exile back to Jerusalem once again, to a city that was in ruins, that was rebuilt back to its splendor and its glory, in which the people came back and created a thriving community where everyone was able to feel welcome, included, to be able to restore their lives, and to find joy and celebration. And I'll just give you a little clip. When the city is rebuilt, and Nehemiah does all this work, there's Ezra, who is the high priest, who is the one that works with Nehemiah throughout the process, because Nehemiah becomes a governor and Ezra becomes a high priest of Israel. It says that when they rededicate the city and they come back together again, that there are two choirs that sing an anthem. And I think of the joy and celebration as the people finally came back together again and celebrated being joined together as a community that once was scattered but now had been made whole, and the relationships that had been broken and now been restored. So with that said, let us offer this prayer to God. God, continue to put us in the right place at the right time to ask the right questions of one another. That the plans that we don't know, you are the architect who has drawn out and designed them. You are the one who knows the importance of our task and the work that we have before us. Give us the strength, the courage, the wisdom, and the ability to know that when you call upon us to be a partner in the plan that you have, it is not by mistake. It's not because we're not the right person, but because you see the potential in us to do great things. Allow us to do so. I pray this in Jesus' name.